Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
Hi, everyone. This is Jillian with Court Junkie. Court Junkie is a true crime podcast that covers court cases and criminal trials using audio clips and interviews with people close to the cases. Court Junkie is available on Apple Podcasts and podcastone.com.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, Pablo Velez Jr. has been behind bars for nearly 20 years for a murder he may not have committed. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my merry co-host, Alice.
Merry Christmas, Brett. We are so close to Christmas while recording this, although I have no idea when this is getting released.
Yeah, it's Christmas Eve as we record this. Everyone's
this is
favorite
how dedicated
holiday.
we are. Forget our families.
Yes, exactly. What is Christmas holidays? This is way more fun than hanging out with our children while chestnuts roast in the open fire and Jack Frost nips at your nose and all those things. Anyways, so yeah, Merry Christmas to everybody. It's probably January, late January by now. So I hope you had a great Christmas. Hope you had a great New Year's, all that stuff. Well, yeah, we're kind of catching up actually, because usually we're about 3 or 4 weeks ahead. For a while there, we were like 3 months ahead because we knew Alice was having a baby. But now it's getting a little bit more relevant. True, you guys are in 2025 right now, but hopefully you appreciate our Christmas spirit overflowing for you.
The countdown's always happening for me. Like the day after Christmas, I'm like 364 more days. Here we go. So we're always approaching Christmas.
Exactly. And look, we have for you guys a really fascinating case tonight. We like doing these innocence cases every now and then because, frankly, a lot of people who are said to be innocent are not. And we think it's important to highlight those cases because those victims matter. And frankly, they're re-victimized every time someone says that their killer is innocent. See E.G. Scott Peterson, who, yet again, as if we needed another mainstream retelling of his sister-in-law's fantasies about his innocence, that is happening again. But not to digress, but we also like to look at these cases because on occasion, rarely, I would say, people who claim to be innocent actually are innocent, and we like to give these cases a fair look, and that's what we're going to do with Pablo Velez Jr. And, excitingly, we're returning to Alice's favorite place in the world, Texas. Now, did you ever live in Houston? I always forget where all you live.
Of course I did. That's
you did.
where Mr. Alice and I actually got married. So Houston's like very special to us.
Awesome.
Did not grow up in Houston, but that was where we got married and where I had my second job, not first job.
Oh, that's right. And I think you still have family in Houston, right? I mean, I don't want to give away your whole life story, but...
No, you can't. No. So we've talked about clerkships after you graduate from law school. So I clerked for 2 different judges in Houston. I don't want to compare it to residency for med school because it's much less difficult than residency is for doctors. But it means that you get to see a lot of the city because a lot of their people just move there for the year. And you travel because it's part of the Fifth Circuit. So we go to New Orleans and kind of get to know the city really well, especially because we're hearing a lot of the cases from that area, often criminal cases.
And the Fifth Circuit is kind of weird. This is purely inside baseball that most of you won't care about. But most circuits, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Alice, but I don't think I am. Most circuits hear cases in multiple cities. So the 11th Circuit will hear cases in Birmingham and Montgomery and Atlanta and Jacksonville and Miami. Am I right? The 5th Circuit only hears cases in New Orleans?
It is possible to hear outside of New Orleans, but no one ever does it because the reality is everyone wants to take their government per diem and go hang out in New Orleans. So I mean, there's nothing illegal about hearing it in Houston, but in my many years of practicing before that circuit, it's never been in Houston. And another funny inside baseball, the 11th Circuit, where Brett clerked, and the 5th Circuit used to be one circuit.
Yeah.
And so every time you cite to a case that is pre-split of the 5th to the 11th Circuit, you have to say this is before the split. So that's why it's binding precedent when you're talking about an 11th Circuit case, but you're in the 5th Circuit. That's really inside baseball, but that actually is relevant for purposes of precedence, which is something we've covered in legal briefs.
And even more inside baseball, if you cite a case from the 5th Circuit, you cite the most cited case in American history, City of Bonner v. Pritchard, which is the case that says that all prior 5th Circuit cases are binding on the 11th Circuit. You don't have to cite it, but I always do, just to add to that tally of how many thousands of times it's been cited. And as a matter of fact, usually cases outside of a circuit aren't really, I mean, they're what we call persuasive, but they're not binding. But I always cite 5th Circuit cases as if they're 11th Circuit cases. Even if they happen after the break, I just feel like there's something more.
They're more than sister circuits, right? They're like conjoined twins that got halved.
There you go. There you go. That's one way to put it. That's one way to put it.
That's a pretty good
Yeah,
analogy.
that's a great analogy. Just
Thank you.
We plan these, by the way. We do this. We do like we record the whole episode before we go live, and then we go live.
We practice
make
our
this
dance
seem like
moves.
it's just, like this is just out of the blue. When
We
in
work
fact-
really hard on this banter that get us 1-star reviews.
Exactly. So for those of you keeping track, this is like minute 5 or so when we get to it. So whoever always posts that on YouTube, make sure you let people know the discussion of the case is starting right now. And so this case takes us back to July 15th, 2004. And on that day, at about 2:05 a.m., a fight broke out at the Perfect Rack Sports Bar and Grill, which is a fantastic name for a sports bar, at 2033 Magnum Street in Houston, Texas. A man named Adrian Payon pulled up in his car with his friends, Emerson, and this is going to be one of those that's going to challenge my southern pronunciations, but Emerson Bojorquez and Esteban Escobar Rodriguez. He got out of his car and walked towards the door, intending to confront a man named Jason Woolley. Jason was standing at the door and said words to the effect of, "You trying to run up on me?" At this point, he did a really stupid thing. He pulled out a 9mm pistol. And then he did something even stupider. He fired a shot into the ground. And, I can say, having prosecuted a lot of these cases, seen a lot of these cases prosecuted, the number of shootings that start with someone either firing a gun into the ground or into the air are incalculable. Because, of course, what's going to happen when somebody fires a gun is anybody else in the area who hears that, who has a gun, is automatically going to pull their gun and a lot of times just start shooting.
And we're talking Texas. So this actually does happen. This is not, I know, because I not only lived here, but I heard cases clerking for judges here. People just literally start pulling out guns and shooting. And we had cases come before us where like 150 shots were fired because someone heard a shot. And it was like some stupid kid firing a gun into the air. And then a lot of people get hurt, obviously.
Yes, and that's what's going to happen here. At this point, after he fires this gun, 2 other men who are in the parking lot, they pull out their guns and begin firing just in the general direction of this group. Payan was shot and wounded. Now, at this point, he actually managed to run around 130 yards across the street to a school bus corral where a whole bunch of school buses are parked and hid under a bus, which was probably pretty smart of him. Escobar, remember Esteban Escobar Rodriguez, he escapes unwounded. But Emerson Bojorquez. Now, no one had actually seen him get out of the car, but apparently he had. He was shot and killed. There were at least 3 shooters involved in all this, and 2 of them got into a gold Cadillac and drove away. And obviously, a gold vehicle, let me just go ahead and tell you, we always like to give advice to those of you who want to commit crimes. If you're going to commit a crime, do not use a gold car. Do not use a gold gun. Do not use gold things. Because if you use something gold, people are going to remember you, and it's going to lead to you being convicted of a crime later on. In this case, though, has a twist. It turns out that the owner of the gold Cadillac was Pablo Velez Jr., and a witness to the shooting would pick Pablo out of a lineup as one of the shooters. And if this is sounding like an open and shut case, maybe we should just go ahead and end now. I will tell you, not so fast, my friends. This case is far more interesting than it initially appears.
So that's it. Like a lot of these shootings in the middle of the night that happen with some sort of disagreement, those are all the facts. So let's start with the timeline. On June 10th, 2004, a resident of the Sandera Briar Grove apartments witnesses a shooting by a man she describes as Hispanic, 6'1", 230 pounds. The police arrive and they collect a .40 caliber shell casing that they will later connect to the Perfect Rack shooting. Now, this description matched that of a man named Ronald Leo Strandberg, who was a bouncer at the Perfect Rack. So if you are interested in kind of casings and how to analyze them, we've talked about this on Legal Briefs with an expert from ATF who talks about using the NIBIN system to compare these bullets, because it helps you to know if one shooting's connected to another one, especially if you have no leads. You can begin to hone in on, who was at both of these places at one time. And that's what they have here. So a security guard writes down the license plate of a white, older model Oldsmobile as F68FZC. This, however, matched a plate belonging to a Kia, not an Oldsmobile, but a slightly different plate, F68XZC. So if you're not great at remembering these things, that was just a difference of one letter, matched the car of Ron Strandberg, that bouncer who worked at the Perfect Rack.
And this will all become important later. I do want to point out, because it's relevant. So in this case, as Alice said, you have this .40 caliber shell, which we use ballistics to match to a gun and to other shells. This science comes under attack, probably because it tends to connect people that people want to believe are innocent to crime scenes. Look at this situation. So you have the .40 caliber. It's matched to another round at the Perfect Rack shooting. And you have the man, Ronald Leo Strandberg, matches the description of the person who's at both places. What a coincidence if ballistics is not a science. And then we match the Oldsmobile to him as well. It's just something worth pointing out, because in our jobs, we see ballistics generate leads like this every single day. Thousands upon thousands of cases where this science is used. And yet, if you listen to some true crime podcasts, you'll be told this is junk science. And I just want you guys to be educated on this, because we want you to have the information when you're listening to cases and you're evaluating this stuff. And it is a simple fact that you can use bullets from guns, shell casings from guns, to match to different shootings. And we do it every day. So this brings us to July 8th. So remember, back on June 10th, we have this shooting. We have this guy named Ronald Lee Strandberg. He's a bouncer at the Perfect Rack, where we know there's going to be a shooting later on. He has this car he's driving, this white Oldsmobile. By July 8th, though, he is no longer driving an Oldsmobile. He is driving a gold Cadillac, one registered to Pablo Velez. And how do we know that? Because on that day, July 8th, he takes the car to E-Race Performance to have a stereo installed. And we'll get back to that information and why it's important later on. So July 13th, 2004. This is going to form the basis for what is going to lead to that shooting. It's probably not surprising to you that the events of July 15th are connected to an earlier incident, and that incident occurs on this day. So on July 13th, between 1 and 2 a.m., so toward the end of the night, when all these things happen, right? It's always right before closing time. People have been drinking, things go wrong. And you have sort of the kind of story that you would see in a Justified episode or like a bad CSI. So you have a 19-year-old man named Adrian Payan, and we know about him. He is involved in that shooting that's going to happen later on. He's at the perfect rack. He's there with one of his apparently multiple girlfriends, Monica Espinosa. And according to Adrian, he gets up to use the bathroom, and Monica follows him to the men's room because she wanted a cigarette. And, you know, Alice is jumping to the bed to jump in on this. But as some of you know, occasionally there will be bars or even airports. If you go to the Charlotte airport, it always freaks me out. And there'll be people hanging out in the bathroom, like handing you something to wipe your hands with or selling you things such as cigarettes. And that's what's going on here. There's a man in the men's restroom who is selling cigarettes.
Sounds like a kid trying to tell their parents like a version of the story. I went to the bathroom to buy a cigarette, a totally legal thing that you can smoke that I'm age appropriate to smoke.
Yes. Yeah. Look, a lot of unreliable narrators in this case. And this feels weird, right? Okay. This feels a little strange. Because she didn't just say, hey, buy a cigarette from the guy in the bathroom.
Bring one back for me.
Right.
Or you're in a bar. There's probably someone with a cigarette nearby.
Yes, exactly. Especially in 2004. Anyway, whatever the case. They go into the bathroom together. Adrian goes to the urinal to do his business. So Monica, she's in the bathroom and she apparently is trying to buy a cigarette from the man. But at the same time, she makes what is described as a suggestive remark to Adrian. I'm not entirely sure what that suggestive remark is. I'm sure you all can use your imagination. Feel free to let it run wild. So she says this thing to Adrian, and another man in the bathroom makes some quip back to her. Unclear what that quip is. Once again, let your imagination run wild. And Adrian,
it's like 1 a.m. Everyone's been drinking. You can imagine he's probably saying something also suggestive back to her, and boyfriend in the urinal's like, you know. Stupid things are happening, basically.
He responds accordingly because Adrian, he's a man of commitment, right? He's so committed to this, one of his multiple girlfriends, that if somebody says something to her, by goodness, he's going to respond. So he responds, and of course, there's a back and forth. Words are exchanged, and eventually he leaves the bathroom. So the other man, the one who made the quip back, he has now left the bathroom. And so you might think that's the end of it. It is not. He actually leaves the bathroom and he gets some of his boys. They come back into the bathroom and they attack Adrian. So he punches Adrian in the face, hits him in his left eye. The two other guys are beating on him. During this altercation, he described seeing what he described as chunking the Texas Syndicate Longhorn sign. So Alice, I assume you are a member of the Texas Syndicate. I mean, I assume it's just the Longhorn sign. Like if you're a Texas fan,
but like you I don't know. It's aggressively, you know, like you chunk it.
Aggressively, it's just aggressively, not horns down, horns up, and then he's chunking it at this person, indicating that they were Texas Syndicate. Because of course, this is a bar frequented by members of various gangs, and I guess at some point this becomes gang related. So they have this whole fight. There's a fourth man there. He actually throws Monica against a wall because she's trying to jump in to help Adrian. So everything is breaking down. There's a big fight happening.
So we mentioned that Monica is not Adrian's only girlfriend. In fact, one of his other girlfriends, Claudia Beltran, was also at the bar that night, and she confirms this story. So I guess they all know about each other. I guess that's not what the fight is about. The fight is not about multiple girlfriends.
I love that he's there. He's there at the bar with one of his girlfriends, and one of his other girlfriends is there too. And it's fine. It's no big.
It's fine. In fact, they are each other's alibis.
Yeah. You know, I gotta give Adrian some props. I mean, he is doing something. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not going to say he's living the dream because it's not my dream. I can barely put up with one woman and a podcast co-host, much less having two girlfriends. I mean, that just seems really difficult. But nevertheless, he's doing it, and they apparently like each other enough that they're, as you said, they're providing alibis for each other.
Right. So after the altercation occurred, Claudia, the other girlfriend, said that Adrian came up and told her what had happened. So basically, she doesn't see what's happening, but this is kind of the close in time to when it happened, confirms, later testimonies of it. And so he tells her what we just heard. Now, there was another fight that same evening at the Perfect Rack, and this one occurred in the parking lot. 5 people were arrested in this fight. They were 4 men and 1 woman. And though this fight was not related to the fight with Adrian in the bathroom, there may have been some overlap. I don't hang out at these sorts of bars, but having seen a lot of police reports, this is not uncommon around the 1 to 2 o'clock hour at bars, certainly in Texas. I will say that, certainly in Houston. So just keep in mind, there's the comments back and forth, punching in the bathroom with Adrian. Then there's another fight where people do get arrested in the parking lot. Now, members of 2 different gangs were involved in both of these altercations. Additionally, one man, Wayne Garcia, may have been involved in both fights. Now, he only admitted to being involved in the parking lot fight, but witnesses like Claudia and her friend claim that Wayne may have also been involved in the bathroom fight. It's around the same time. Things are heated. It's not that far-fetched to believe that at least someone is probably involved in both fights.
And we're throwing a lot of names at you, and you're trying to keep them all straight. Just know that most of these people don't really matter. It's just there are a lot of people who were involved in this fight. And one name you may have noticed has not come up yet is the subject of this podcast, Pablo Velez. There's all these other people, members of gangs, all sorts of people who are fighting. You know, they're building a beef here. There is some bad blood that is starting to bubble over, multiple fights, multiple gangs, all sorts of stuff happening at this place. And you've got Claudia, who is important, who's seeing all this. She is present for both fights. She's present for the fight in the bathroom, or at least she sees it happening. She's present for the fight in the parking lot. She sees it happening. And she's going to end up being a star witness for the prosecution in the case we're going to discuss.
So now Adrian doesn't name these men in his 2004 statement. However, police received information from an anonymous source during the investigation that one of them was Richard, aka Shorty, Cisneros. Now, furthermore, during the 2017 reinvestigation of the crime that would follow, Adrian identified 3 of them as Richard Shorty. He said that this was the man at the urinal. Ron Strandberg, the man who held Monica at the door, preventing her from helping Adrian. And Jason Woolley.
One of those names you're very familiar with, Ron Strandberg. Ron Strandberg is the man who matches the description of the earlier shooting. He is the man who took the gold Cadillac to get a radio installed. He is the bouncer at the bar. Then you have Richard Shorty Cisneros. And sometimes, occasionally, people are called Shorty because they're really tall. Well, it's like, tiny. If you're called tiny, you're probably huge, right? Shorty is short. He is like 5 foot nothing, basically, is why he is called Shorty. And then you have Jason Woolley, who I think is he was the one standing at the door who fired the gun into the ground, that famous moment earlier on. So these are the individuals who we've seen at this fight. Okay, so let's fast forward July 14th and 15th. So on July 14th, between the hours of 12:52 p.m. and 4:44 a.m., the following day, there are 51 calls between Ron Strandberg, Shorty Cisneros, and Jason Woolley. So those 3 men that we just mentioned who were involved in this fight in the bathroom. 37 of those occurred before the shooting that happened, and 14 occurred in the couple hours that followed the shooting. So we have the shooting that forms the basis of our story, the one that happened at the Perfect Rack after you had these multiple fights the day before. There's going to be a shooting. We're trying to figure out who was involved. These 3 men, the same 3 men who were in the bathroom, who were involved in the shooting, are exchanging a lot of calls around this shooting. Once again, there is a name that we have not yet to mention. It's the person who is the subject of our podcast. And I promise at some point we're going to start talking about him. During this time, Pablo Velez Jr. is not involved in any of these calls. He is not called by any of them, and he does not call any of them.
Now, when you start talking about all these phone records, Brett, you and I have stared at so many phone records in our subpoenas before. And all I have to say is it's like the bane of my existence because they're so boring and they are not as straightforward as something like suspect 1 call suspect 2 at this time. They're like random numbers, and you have to match the numbers, and then you have to figure out if it was a hang up or, in other words, there's a reason why these call analyses take a long time, because I'm thinking about going to trial with these 51 calls and establishing all 51 calls and how they happened and in what order in a narrative form to help the jury understand what's happening. I only say this because we are pretty spoiled in the true crime world to know these facts because it's presented at some point in a case. 51 calls. But in reality, 51 calls could be like an all-day testimony by a cell phone expert to get that into evidence. So just know this. It's not as simple as like clicking your fingers to know these types of things. You have to sit there and match up phone numbers and figure out what happens with all these cell phone records in order to tell your story when you're the prosecution. On July 14th, 2004, at 9:02 p.m., Pablo, the guy who we said we were going to talk about at the top of this episode, makes a phone call in Wilmer, Texas, which he testified was made at a truck stop. Now, Wilmer, Texas is a 3.5-hour drive from home. So Pablo was driving an 18-wheeler, and based on kind of just maps, he likely did not get home before 12:30 a.m. if we have this call from Wilmer, Texas at 9 o'clock. Around 10:30 p.m., Claudia and her friend Nancy Almanaz arrive at the Perfect Rack. Nancy used to work there and went to the pool hall this evening to speak with the manager about getting her job back. Around the same time, Wayne Garcia, Luis Trinidad, and Fernando Chamayo also arrived at the Perfect Rack. Now, when they got there, they played pool with Jason Woolley and 3 other men. Shortly after they arrived, Nancy was filling out her job application when she saw a fight break out outside. She saw a man in a red shirt fighting with a smaller man, and the man in the red shirt would later be identified as Jason Woolley. I know that was a lot of names. Kind of the operative thing here is we have a timestamp on where Pablo is at 10:30. And it's not in Houston, Texas. It's somewhere probably between Wilmer and Houston. But at 10:30, we have Claudia and Nancy at the Perfect Rack, and we see a fight happening. Pablo's not there.
Yeah, things are already getting heated at the Perfect Rack. We already have a situation that's starting to boil over again. So let's fast forward to 11 p.m. And I will note, Alice mentioned this earlier, Pablo, he's driving this 18-wheeler. That's his job. He drives trucks. He's at a truck stop. He's probably not going to get home till around 12:30. This is important because the prosecution's theory of the case has him getting home at midnight, about 30 minutes before probably his earliest arrival time. As we've said before, the prosecution's theory, we just did a legal briefs on this, the prosecution's theory is not evidence, but it is meant to help you sort of conceptualize the evidence and their theory of what happened. And we'll see how the fact that he may have arrived home a little bit later actually does have an impact here. It's not necessary for the crime to have occurred, but if you're trying to decide whether or not Pablo was involved, it probably is important. Okay, so it's 11 p.m. Now, we're going back to Adrian. Yo, Adrian. So Adrian Payan. Now remember, I just want to try and keep this straight because there are so many names. Adrian is the one who was at the Perfect Rack with his 2 girlfriends that went into the bathroom and ended up getting in a fight with multiple men, including Shorty Cisneros, Ron Strandberg, and Jason Woolley. Jason Woolley is currently at the bar, and we know from the story earlier, at some point, Adrian is going to show up there and confront Jason Woolley. So at 11 p.m., we have Adrian. He's back in the story. Now, according to him, Claudia actually calls him to say that there was a guy at the Perfect Rack with his hand wrapped up, and she suggested that he come by and see if it was the same guy he got into a fight with earlier that week. So Claudia basically, usually you get in a fight, if you punch somebody, it's going to hurt you, maybe not as much as it hurts them, but it's going to hurt you. I mean, his hand's wrapped up for a reason, probably because he punched somebody. Claudia is being a troublemaker, and she is calling to let Adrian know this. Now, we're telling you what actually happened. Her initial statements to the police was more like, oh, she was warning him, don't come, because it might be the guy who you got in a fight with. That is not what happened. She is absolutely calling him to tell him, hey, that guy who beat you up, I think he's here. You should come by and see what you can do about it, right? So Adrian of course, is going to go to the perfect rack. But Adrian remembers what happened last time. So Adrian, he's smart. This time, he's not going to show up by himself. He brings Escobar and Emerson with him. They arrive at the perfect rack. So they go to check it out. At the same time, multiple of these other people who were there are leaving. So Adrian, he shows up, he scopes out these people, and, you know, the people, he's seeing this Wayne Garcia, he's seeing this Luis Trinidad, he's seeing this Fernando Chamayo. Remember, those guys weren't involved in the fight. Those were not the people who were fighting him. So when he shows up, he sees those 3 guys leaving. He's looking for 3 guys. He sees those 3 guys leaving, and he says to himself, those aren't the guys. She's got this wrong. So he decides to leave. So he leaves the bar again. Now, at trial, Adrian would testify that he saw Pablo Velez walking out of the perfect rack with these 3 men, even though this was not part of his initial statement to police. This would seem to be very important, of course, because it puts Pablo, our suspected murderer, at the perfect rack the night of the shooting earlier in the night. But there's a problem. This is literally impossible. Pablo could not have been there at the time because he would have been driving his truck back from Dallas. He has a really excellent alibi for most of the night. He's driving his truck back from Dallas. And in fact, only minutes later, at about 11:05 p.m., he actually makes a call. And his phone pings 111 miles away from the perfect rack. And as we have learned, this is another piece of evidence you can use in cases, despite what some people tell you. Cell phone pings are very accurate. So if it's saying he's 111 miles away, he's 111 miles away. So he's not there. This part of Adrian's testimony is erroneous, but I'm certain it had some effect on the jury in just putting Pablo in the area of where the shooting is going to happen.
So this night is rolling over into the 12 a.m. hour, so technically it's July 15th, 2004. So around midnight, Pablo's driving log shows him arriving back, but this actually doesn't match his phone pings. Of course, inaccurate driving logs are almost required for truckers. My understanding is like the time logs are not very accurate for truckers because they have certain rules of how long they can drive, for example. And so sometimes the numbers are fudged a little bit because they want to make it faster or whatever. You get paid by the miles, I think. So you want to get places faster in general.
And I think it was probably important for him to finish this run by the end of the day. I don't know why exactly. I don't understand all the rules for truckers and how all that works, but I think it was important that he be done by midnight for the purposes of, you know, maybe when his next run could begin. There's all sorts of regulations on how much truckers can drive their trucks. That's why most truckers have 2 sets of books, the official one that they show to the authorities and the real one, which records their actual amount of time they spend on the road. So he has this, and this will be introduced at trial, and this is something the prosecution will use to say, look, here's an official document, and it says he got there at midnight. So he must have been there at midnight because it says it on the log, right? That's going to be their argument. He wasn't there at midnight.
Right. And, of course, there's even human error with writing in a log, but what we have, of course, is his phone pings. So at 12:13 a.m., Pablo's phone pinged in Spring, Texas, when he makes a phone call. That's nowhere near home. It's still a ways outside of Houston. At 12:40 a.m., Pablo left the Mobile gas station on I-45 in Airtex after dropping LG Homes there. Now, this is 30 minutes from Pablo's home, which means, based on all his earlier phone pings, this is right on the right timeline. Around 1 a.m., Pablo himself says he arrives home. And that matches the latest ping we had from the gas station when he dropped someone off, being 30 minutes away from home. When he gets home, he showered and ate a bowl of Lucky Charms. At 1:45 a.m., Pablo claims he left to go to his ex-girlfriend's, Anel Pina's home, a 30-minute drive away. Now, at trial, she refutes this claim.
And that'll become important. We'll spend a lot of time on it. One thing I want to note is I really appreciate that you called it Mobile. This just shows the Alabama in you. But it's the mobile.
Oh, it's mobile. Is it a mobile?
It's the mobile. It's mobile. But that's fine. Mobile works. I
you
like
want to
it.
know what's funny? Of course I knew that living in Texas. But now I'm thinking in the ways of Alabama.
Yeah.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
No, that's
the
not.
mobile
It's awesome.
gas
Mobile.
station. I should definitely know this. Everyone I know works for one of the gas companies.
What's interesting about this case is so many cases, you have these innocence claims, they depend so much on the words of loved ones, right? I mean, the number of times where the alibi we absolutely should believe is the mom or the sister or the dad, right? And we just take them at their word. It happens all the time. Here, a lot of this is backed up by cell phone pings and things that just can't be denied. It is interesting, the girlfriend issue. Now, she is the ex-girlfriend, and she was the ex-girlfriend at the time. Like I said, we'll talk about it more, but this is an issue for Pablo. It's going to become an issue for Pablo at trial, because if he is trying to fabricate an alibi, that is something that the prosecution can point to and a jury can grab onto as evidence of guilt. There's all sorts of reasons you might fabricate an alibi. Maybe because you're just scared. Maybe because you really believe it, but you're mistaken. Or maybe because you did it. Obviously, the prosecution's going to say he's making this up because he knows where he was. He was shooting somebody, and he really needed her to say that he was with her, because this was the one part of his alibi that we don't have some sort of independent verification for. So that's why he's doing this. Okay, that brings us to 2 a.m. So this is closing time. I don't know if it's closing time for everybody in Houston or if this is just the closing time for the Perfect Rack, but it is closing for the evening and patrons are beginning to leave. Just before this, Claudia calls Adrian again. And this time she tells him that Woolley, Jason Woolley, remember, one of the guys he got into a fight with, is at the pool hall and that he wants to fight him. And so she's like, you should get back over here. So Adrian, he's still looking to avenge himself from the last time. He returns. And once again, he's got Esteban Rodriguez with him and Emerson Bjorquez with him. So they get out of the car, at least Payan and Rodriguez do. Remember, we don't really know when Emerson gets out of the car, but at some point he gets out as well. But initially it's going to be Adrian Payan and Esteban Rodriguez. They get out of the car and they are walking to the front of the pool hall. At the front of the pool hall, once again, you have Claudia Beltran, who's there, Nancy Almanza, who is her friend, and Jason Woolley, who was the person that Claudia called him about. Jason Woolley is standing there. Payan sees him, and he thinks, this is one of the guys that I was in a fight with. So they're walking towards the pool hall. Beltran points towards Woolley. Now, he's wearing a red shirt. Remember, he got into a fight earlier on. At this point, this is when Woolley makes a comment about them rolling up on him or whatever and pulls out his gun and fires a shot. So Payan and Rodriguez, they turn to run. Other shots start to be fired from guns all over the parking lot. And I know we've already said it once, but this story is so familiar to me. It just happens all the time. So one shot is fired, and now everybody else is opening up. So Beltran, she is standing near Woolley when he fires his gun. And she sees a man in a blue shirt with what she describes as a long gun standing near a gold Cadillac in the parking lot. Long gun, I assume, means some sort of rifle, maybe like an AR or something like that. I mean, it could be a shotgun, but I think she would say a shotgun. I think he has some sort of rifle. He does not have a handgun. He's got something else. So the shooting's beginning. And all this happens. They see the man in the gold Cadillac. At some point, they're all chasing each other. They're fighting each other. These people jump into the gold Cadillac and they drive off. Now, Beltran and her friend Almanza, they get into Beltran's car and they start following the gold Cadillac, which I don't know if this is brave or stupid, but that's what they're doing. They are now in the car chasing this vehicle full of people who have just shot people. They're after them. And there are two of them. So one of them memorizes the first couple letters of the gold Cadillac's license plate number, Almanza. And then Beltran, she memorizes the last part of the license plate number. And then they write the number down in her Bible, which she has with her, which I love. You're at the bar calling your boyfriend, who you share with a couple other people, to come back to the bar to get into a fight, but you got your Bible with you in your car. So she actually writes down the license plate number in her Bible using her eyeliner. Once again, it's like something out of a movie. I mean, this is like a Quentin Tarantino film. That's sort of what I'm imagining in my head.
In other words, it's already starting to sound a little bit more like a setup. Like they were working, if two people who are shooting jump into the same car. Me, as the prosecutor, trying to put the story together is, the first shot was like a reason to allow for plausible deniability of, well, I clearly didn't shoot anybody because I shot the ground, but me shooting allowed other people to start shooting indiscriminately, except someone wasn't shooting indiscriminately. They were lying in wait to make the shot. And basically no one can point fingers because the person everyone saw shoot shot it at the ground. Tale as old as time, basically.
This is a really fascinating question because remember all those telephone calls that are happening between the three men who had been involved in the fight the day before. The guys who had jumped Adrian and beat him up. You know, they're obviously having a lot of calls, and it feels like an ambush, like you were saying. But the person who seems to be setting up this ambush is Claudia, because Claudia keeps calling Adrian and telling him to come back to the bar. First was sort of this vague assertion that she thought the guys were there. But then with the very specific, this person wants to fight you. The person who, as Alex said, just so happened to fire their gun into the ground, which then led to the shooting. But then Claudia, who it feels like to the world was setting Adrian, her boyfriend, maybe she wasn't happy the fact he had another girlfriend, I don't know, but who feels like she's setting him up, she's the one who jumps into the car with her buddy and starts chasing him down the road. So I don't know if it kind of was a setup, but it got out of hand, or if Claudia sort of became an unwitting part of this setup because they really wanted to lure him back and they sort of goaded her into calling her boyfriend and getting him back over there to sort of defend her honor or something. There's some stuff going on here that we don't know and we'll never know.
But one thing to note is that they probably were familiar with each other because these people have been at the Perfect Rack like multiple times in the same week. Your theory of maybe they're goading Claudia either wittingly or unwittingly to be part of a potential ambush is very plausible because I don't think they are complete strangers, right? They have at least seen each other several times this week alone. Now, Claudia and her friend Almanza then returned to the Perfect Rack where they found Payan, who had been shot in the back. That's when they discovered that Bojorquez was lying dead on the sidewalk near the spot where Claudia had seen the man in the blue shirt emerge from between the cars in the parking lot. Now, ultimately, both Jason Woolley and Pablo Velez Jr. were arrested in connection with the shooting. Pablo was arrested when police discovered that the gold Cadillac belonged to him. After they made that discovery, they showed Claudia Beltran his photo and a photo lineup, and she pointed to Pablo's photo saying, "That's the man in the blue shirt. That's who I saw." Now, both men were ultimately convicted of murder. Pablo Velez Jr. was sentenced to 30 years in prison, where he remains today. So right after closing time, I guess, right after all this chaos ensues at 2:20 a.m., according to him, Pablo arrived at Annelle's house. Once again, remember, she refutes this to authorities. So that's his alibi. So there's these like two potentially competing timelines. But Pablo's words are he drove that 30 minutes, and at 2:20, when all this chaos is ensuing at the Perfect Rack, he's actually at Annelle's house. Except no one can back up his story.
And let me just say, as someone, you know, it's very hard for me when we listen to these stories not to interject myself into them. I always try and not do that. But I have to say, if I had just been driving an 18-wheeler all day and I had gotten home at 12:30, I'd have eaten my Lucky Charms and gone to bed. I wouldn't have been going to the bar to shoot people. I wouldn't have been going to Annelle's house. I'd have been going to sleep. Now, Pablo, apparently, that's not what he did. And the prosecution, their theory is he parked his truck, he got home, maybe he had some Lucky Charms, maybe not. He jumped into his gold Cadillac, and he headed over to the bar for a drink. His story is, no, I went over to my girlfriend's house, and she's going to say that didn't happen. But what we do know happened is, or at least according to Pablo and according to the cell phone records, at 5:15 a.m. the next day, Ron Strandberg, remember him? He calls Pablo and asks him to report the gold Cadillac stolen. This is the first time, by the way, we mentioned all those phone calls between the various people. This is the first time one of them calls Pablo, is at 5:15 a.m. that day. And he asks him to report the gold Cadillac stolen. Now, you might wonder why he would be making this call. Remember, the Cadillac is in Pablo's name. But according to Pablo, he had actually given the car to Ron on the condition that he take over the payments. Pablo had bought the car, but he could not afford to make the payments. And rather than have it just repossessed and I guess do terrible things to his credit, he gives it to somebody else who can make the payments. Now, the car was never transferred into Ron's name, so only Pablo could actually report it stolen. So Pablo calls Ron back and tells him that he will report the car stolen, but it does not appear that he ever actually did that. We have these 2 phone calls. The reason you have to believe Pablo here, right? I mean, this is what Pablo is telling us, that Ron is asking him to report the car stolen. He's saying, okay, I'll report it stolen. He never does report it stolen. I don't know exactly what happened during this phone call, but this is what Pablo says happened. So on August 7th, fast forward another month, the police respond to a call about a shooting that took place at Buffalo Fred's Ice House. And once again, there had been a fight outside and shots were fired. And guess who's there? Ron Strandberg, Jason Woolley, and Richard Shorty Cisneros. According to some witnesses, threatening people who had been at the Perfect Rack shooting. A friend of Emerson Bajorquez, he was the one who was killed, his father was pistol whipped and actually had his teeth knocked out by the men during this fight. And he would actually testify that he was shot at by someone in this group. Despite this happening, and despite his testimony, and despite his obvious injuries, there was no police report ever made about the shooting. That may strike you as strange. It might strike me as strange. But honestly, a lot of these things, remember, what's the purpose of this? This is about people who may have been at that shooting and what they saw. It's about intimidating people. Are those people who've now had their teeth knocked out and been shot at, are they going to just turn around and call the police? Probably not. That's the whole point of the incident. And no police report is made, though there is testimony about this fight.
And that's the end of the timeline. And what you may have noticed is that there are a lot of repeat players, but Pablo hasn't really appeared that much except the presence of really his gold Cadillac and maybe these 2 calls that he says are about the gold Cadillac.
This case, there's not a ton on it. It's not like a lot of the cases we do where there's a lengthy trial and there's all sorts of information. This is actually a pretty condensed case. But that may strike some of you as unusual, but I'll just go ahead and tell you. The cases that we are all familiar with, the murder cases that we watch, the cases that go on for a month, those are the exception. Even most murder cases are short. They don't have that many witnesses. They are not complex. They are very straightforward. You can imagine how a murder case like this would go. You have a couple people testify about what happened that night. You have someone identify the shooter. You have the police officers testify, and then you're done. And that's essentially what's going to happen in this case. So next week, we are going to talk about the investigation. We're going to talk about what led the police to arrest Pablo and put him on trial and eventually convict him. We're going to talk about what Pablo says happened and what the evidence says about this case. Really, this all comes down to what happened between 12:45, 1 o'clock, and 2 in the morning, when Pablo would have arrived back home and when the shooting occurred. And is there evidence that he was there? And what is the evidence that was there? Remember, there is good evidence. His vehicle is there, and there's an eyewitness who says he is the one who did it. Claudia Beltran. Now, you may already be questioning her credibility, but she is going to be a very important witness, and we're going to talk about what she actually said while she was on the stand. But that's what we're going to do next week. So, Alice, do you want to answer a few questions?
I think the people deserve it after having watched a rave happen at the beginning of this episode.
It's true. Those of you who are listening when this episode comes out, if only you're patrons, they're the things you would see. You can't even imagine it. Sometimes we're not as professional as maybe we should be. I'll just say that. Okay.
It's Christmas Eve.
It is Christmas Eve. And since this was a relatively short episode, we will... used to be this was how long our episodes were. But our episodes have gotten longer and longer and longer and longer. It's like everything else. We can't shut up. So we'll do a couple questions today. Let's see if there's any Christmas questions. Do we have any Christmas questions since it's Christmas time? I already asked you what your favorite Christmas movie was. Mm-hmm. I'll ask you the question that I asked Allison Sweeney who was with us a couple episodes ago.
Can you
since
believe
you weren't
it?
here for that. I know, it was amazing. Just like,
Are you really going to do that? After that was my like Christmas present to you.
It was amazing. It was great. It was awesome. Thank you, Alice, for having a baby. And thank you, Allison. Allie.
Thank you. Thank you, Allie
like
Sweeney,
best
for
friends.
being here. She's awesome.
Which, by the way, she has a new movie coming out soon. So
I can't wait to watch it.
I know. It's another one with that prosecutor in it. I'm a big fan of the prosecutor. Anyways, so the question that we asked and that she answered was favorite Hallmark Christmas movie and famous Christmas movie overall.
Oh, man. I'm not sure I remember the Hallmark movie Christmas names because I
That's the
watched
problem.
all of them.
Yeah.
I've seen all of them. In fact, when I had my baby, all I did was watch Christmas movies. I watched every Christmas movie on Hallmark. So now the problem is like Hulu has their own, Netflix has their own.
I know.
You know, all of the streaming services have their own. It's not a problem. It's a fantastic problem to have. But really, I like them simple. I don't want it to be complicated. I don't want it to deviate from the script. I just want it to be in a small town with beautiful lights, snow, but it doesn't look too cold. But Lindsay Lohan has been killing it with these Christmas movies. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're hilarious.
I haven't seen them.
They're really
I'll say this.
funny.
I've already answered this question last time, and I answered with Snowmancer, of course. But the Hallmark movies, they have this series. I don't know if they did one this year or not, because I think they're running out of pronouns. But it's like time for... Put pronoun in there to come home for Christmas. Time for you. Time for me. Time for us. Time for them to come home for Christmas. And they're all good. Every one of them's good. They're all different. They involve the song in some way. Allison Sweeney was in one of them. They're all really good. So any of those movies, excellent.
When you have a winning combination, you just go with it. Okay, overall Christmas movie.
Overall Christmas movie.
Have we answered this before? This is hard.
Yeah,
because
Die Hard.
There's
obviously.
multiple, right? I know what we're going to be watching as a family, like tomorrow. And that's because we have small children, though. We're going to be watching Elf. Home Alone is too scary for them still, but I love Home Alone. And there are now classics that were not that wouldn't have been classics a few years ago, like Love Actually, The Holiday. I would count those as classics now, but they're not classics in the sense of like Home Alone and Christmas of the Cranks or something like that, you know?
We used to watch Love Actually every year. I wish it's been a while since we've seen it. I love that movie. The movie's great.
Some people
hate
I used to watch
movie.
that every
It's
year
like
too, but now with kids,
movie.
it's a little hard to do
I
the
know,
whole,
that's the thing.
sex
Kids
scenes.
ruin everything. I don't mean that.
Everything.
But they do make it harder because there've been several things I've wanted to watch, and I'm like, I can't watch it after the kids go to bed. And then after the kids go to bed, I'm tired, and I go to bed.
Exactly.
So I never get to see it. So
I do love Love Actually because it's hilarious, and
it is hilarious.
Anything for Hugh Grant to dance, you know.
And if you just go with it, just be happy, people. Quit being so like.
I really like
negative
The Holiday
about
too.
Everything. Yeah.
The Jack Black and Jude Law. It's just like a happy movie, and Kate Winslet. It's just just a happy movie.
This person wants to know what's your favorite Christmas recipe to make.
So today I baked. Well, I'd hate to bake it, but I love to eat it. I hate baking molasses cookies because molasses are terrible to work with, but like molasses gingerbreads are so yummy. But I like gingerbread like chewy cookies, not the crisps, and not like too soft, but like the true, like it tastes like molasses. But I really don't like working with molasses because it's slow as molasses.
I mean, I like to cook, I guess, and I'm good at cooking some things.
You can say what you like to eat.
But there's no, I mean, for Christmas, I love pecan pie. I love it. If you can get a bourbon pecan pie, like
That's
the farm we go to has.
Have you had their bourbon pecan pie?
Their bourbon pecan pie is off the charts.
Incredible.
It is really good. Really good. Another thing with molasses in it. It's very, very excellent. All right, let's see. Next.
What? Is it a good one?
Well, this is from Mommy Wookit. And she wants to know if we have ever considered running for president and vice president.
Never.
What would be the first thing you'd change, and what would your running slogan be? Well, first of all, we can't run for president and vice president because we're from the same state. One of us would have to move.
Unless one of us moves.
Yeah. You can't be from the same state if you run for
there you go. There's a technicality.
Yeah.
And I'm not running without you, so there, case closed.
What would your running slogan be?
We'd have to do something about ending true crime or
There
like
you go.
crime. I we're already in the like celebrity politician world anyways. Not that we're celebrities, but like just really leaning into the whole true crime thing.
There you go.
Yeah, tough on crime, obviously. The prosecutors. That's obvious right there.
There you go. On the thing that I would change, I mean, I would either have legislation about college football in NIL situation, which is out of control. Or, I mean, I might have to jump into this debate on daylight savings time and what the time should be.
Oh, I've been campaigning on that since I was a kid.
All I can
daylight
say
savings. Just stick with the time.
I did not realize that there were people who liked standard time. And for me, like if we're going to have another civil war in this country, this may be when it's over. Because I cannot live in 100% standard time. I can't do it. There's a reason that standard time only lasts for like 3 months at this point. No one likes standard time. We've shortened it as much as we can. Daylight savings time is the way. That way, the day lasts longer. I know it's a little darker when you get up. Who cares? You're getting up. This is the problem. It's morning people. They ruin everything, and they're trying to ruin the time.
It is morning people.
And I'll just say, if it's standard time forever, just keep changing. I don't want standard time forever. I would rather change 3 times a year than do all the standard time.
I think.
So there you go. We don't talk about politics.
You didn't know you were that.
But we're talking about this because it's too important.
I didn't know you were this passionate.
I mean,
daylight and standard time.
It gets dark at like 4 o'clock here during standard time. There's nothing more depressing than leaving work and it's already totally dark. Agree. That is just horrible. Awful.
Yeah, awful. I'm there with you too. All right, let's run on true crime and daylight saving.
Yes, more daylight. More daylight. Not you vampires can just move somewhere else.
Turn on a light.
Yeah, get a flashlight. I mean, come on.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, and it's always like, and they always, just like all political cowards, they hide behind the children. Like, what about the children having to go to the bus?
What children? Are they getting up to hoe the fields? Like poor little Timmy's hoeing the field at 5 a.m. He needs the daylight. Timmy should be going to school.
Oh, God. Yeah. Anyway.
All right.
So that's my opinion on that. I think probably with that, we should call it a day. I will say this, for those of you who've missed it, we now have a Substack, which I still don't even know what a Substack is. I don't know why it's called a Substack.
But it's like where you write the new MySpace page.
Yeah, exactly. It's like MySpace for nerds. So we have a Substack where we are writing things on various issues around true crime. And also other people are involved. Jason Blair is basically our editor. He's writing stuff. People who are interested in true crime in various ways are writing stuff. If you're interested in writing something and having it on our Substack, submit it. We would love to take a look at it. And basically, we just want to talk about true crime, highlight sort of ethical true crime people, talk about some of the issues that are going on, things that we talk about on the podcast. But for those of you who maybe would rather read it, you have that option as well. So I hope you guys will subscribe. Most of the stuff is free. I think we are going to have a few sort of exclusive things for people who are subscribers. We're still kind of working all that out, but check that out. It's called The True Crime Times. Links are available in various places. I'll make sure to drop it in the show notes for this. And there's also, we're on Twitter, so follow us on Twitter. All that stuff. That's our newest thing. So support it. Anyway, anything else you want to talk about, Alice?
No. Merry Christmas in January when you guys hear this. But really, Merry Christmas, Brett. This is, when you texted me earlier, you're like, it's Christmas Eve. Want to record? I'm like, of course. That's all I want to do.
What would you rather do?
Nothing. Not spend time with my adorable baby.
Exactly. Babies.
Babies. So many of them.
Yes. So absolutely. Merry Christmas to all of you who are in the chat right now. Happy New Year to everyone who's listening. It's a great thing about the podcast is because we record so early, you get to hear, most of you are in late January and maybe you need a little pick-me-up. Well, we're bringing you some Christmas spirit to you where you are. So Merry Christmas in January. Love to hear what you think about this case so far. Shoot us an email, prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all your social media. Follow us on The Gallery, which is on Facebook. Great discussions always there. Join Patreon. You can watch us record these early for as little as $3 a month. And you get all the episodes early and ad-free as well. All right, guys. Well, we're going to try and wrap this up next week. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
and we are the Prosecutors. Fancy.
I was just about to chat to everybody. Go home. Brett's gonna have way too much fun tonight.
Okay.
Nothing's going on, guys. Brett's having way too much fun. What are you doing now? Auto-tuning us?
Auto-tune, that would be cool.
Oh my gosh. This is exactly how everyone wanted to spend Christmas Eve. Okay, we're just not recording tonight, are we? What is this?
Instead of adding all this,
this is why you know that this is how you know that we're good friends. I'm not even questioning what's happening. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Pluto TV is the place for movie fans like me.
And TV fans like me.
They've got something for everyone, and it's totally free.
You can binge laugh-out-loud sitcoms like Frasier.
And rewatch cult classics like Higher Learning.
Whether you're in the mood to solve a little crime before bedtime with NCIS or Tracker.
Or curl up with a surefire hit like Forrest Gump.
Run, Forrest! Pluto TV has thousands of movies and shows, all for free.
Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.